Film is definitely not dead. Today on the Slant Lens, we're going to take a look at transparency film versus print film. When would you use it? Why would you choose it? So let's get started and see what we can do. We've got a roll here that we actually shot earlier. Let's preview it. I'm not seeing anything.
I don't see anything.
I don't know, we must have done something wrong. We'll go shoot some more. Hi, this is JP Morgan.
Hi, and I'm Mare.
Mare's here to help me today to compare transparency film to print film. No, you cannot preview your transparency film by unrolling it. That exposes it and ruins it. So don't do that. What is transparency film? How does it compare to C41 or print film? And then really, why would you choose to use transparency film? What are the situations you would like to use it in? What is the dynamic range of transparency and how does it compare to print film? Because they are very, very different. But there are some situations you're going to want to use transparency in if you love film, and it's going to look fabulous. So let's get started, see what we can do. We're back from Canada. So let's start with our over and under test. Portra has a great latitude for being over and under. Provia and Velvia do not. So there's our first exposure. It's interesting looking at the skin on these. The Portra does not have as pretty a skin color, I don't think, as the Provia. I like the color of the Provia on the skin. I think the Velvia is a little warm on the skin, but that's our normal exposure. -1 stop, the Portra still looks about the same. Provia and the Velvia both look about the same. They don't look bad at all. Now we go to -2 stops. You see the transparency film, the Provia and the Velvia, they just start to fall apart. The Velvia is starting to lose shadow detail completely. We just have a pasty look in the Provia. So now if we go to -3 stops, this is where we really start to see it. We almost have nothing with the Velvia. I mean, we don't have, the blacks are just blocked up completely. We're extremely blocked up with the Provia, but the Portra is still not so terrible. I mean, it's holding its own. So at -3, Portra's not bad. Provia is really pasty and Velvia is just gone. Now when we go plus, it's really interesting to see what happens. So here's the three of them. Portra is looking fine. Provia already is blocking up in the highlights. Same with Velvia. We're blocking up in the highlights completely. We've lost the shadow, any detail in the building on the left, both in the Provia and the Velvia. So when we go to +2, that's when I think this gets really interesting. It's kind of funny, actually. Portra still looks great. We've got detail in the highlights. We're holding highlight detail in the building on the left-hand side. We still see some of the brick there. But look at the Provia. The highlights are gone. There is nothing in the building. There's almost nothing in her dress. The Velvia is even worse. I mean, there's just nothing. We're starting to just see the blackness in there. We just see all of our black detail and nothing else. When we go to +3, it gets even worse. We almost only see her eyes in the Velvia and the Provia. I mean, we still have a usable image there. We still have detail in the building bricks on the left-hand side in the highlights. Her dress still has detail, but the Provia and Velvia are gone. They're like gone. I don't know where they've gone, but they're gone. They're gone, gone, gone. That's why for wedding photographers, run and gun kind of situations, that Portra just makes so much more sense because you can miss your exposure by a stop or so, or 2 stops, and you're still gonna be okay. So let's take a look at how these 3 different films look with skin. Here's all 3 of them, and it's interesting. I don't love the Portra as much as I do the Provia. I like Provia. I think Provia is the best transparency film out there because it gives you great shadow detail and it holds the highlight detail and it has a nice warmish tone in the skins, which I really like. Now that warmish tone, when you underexpose it or overexpose it, starts to build, becomes more magenta. But when you're on with your exposure, you get a really beautiful skin tone with this. And now Velvia, I don't like Velvias with skin because it's a punchy, punchy film. There are times though when Velvia really makes a lot of sense because it's so punchy, because it has so much contrast. When you're in a really shadow situation, that Velvia looks great because it takes whatever highlights are there and it is going to amplify them and it looks fabulous. But as far as skin goes, I think that Provia looks incredible. Just a great look. So let's look at the stuff we shot in Banff National Park. That was a lot of fun. This is where transparency really is ideal because it gives you vivid color. Most people that are shooting transparency film these days are shooting Scenics because you have the time to make sure your exposure's right, and then you get great color. So let's look at this. All I did on this, I get a negative 0.75 exposure adjustment because they were all a little bit bright. So the Portra is still a little flat. It's not very contrasty. You don't get great blacks. It just feels a little pasty overall. Easily corrected though. The Provia has a little stronger color. The greens are nice. They're much nicer than the Portra. But and the blues are nice. Get a great color. You get a little, see that little magenta in the sand. It's easy to see that starting to build. And then we go to the Velvia in this image, which is brightly lit, direct sun on this. There's really not a high dynamic range here. You're not looking at deep shadows or bright whites. That Velvia looks fabulous because the greens are nice, and the blues are beautiful, and you just see there's a little bit of green in that color, but it's just a great look. Now, if I take these and I just give them a little bit of contrast, and I go into dehaze, and I'll give about a plus 50 dehaze, which I love what that does to an image like this, then this is what we get. Much nicer in that Portra. It's just now starting to look like an image, but look how the Provia sings. I mean, the Provia is giving you sharp, beautiful colors. The greens are nice. The blue is wonderful. Same with the Velvia. And again, though, that Velvia is a little darker, a little deeper in the shadows. You see more contrast, so you can see the difference in those two. But just beautiful Scenic there. So let's go on and take a look at a high dynamic range situation. And this is when you've got deep shadows and you've got whites. I've got clouds and I've got deep shadow, and this is a tough situation for any film. But as you would expect, the Portra really is holding all of the detail in the whites. It's opened up in the shadows, so you see detail in the shadows. The Provia is actually pretty nice. It's looking pretty good. I can get detail in the clouds. I can get detail in the shadows. Now, I did anything I could to recover these to make them look right. So I like the Provia. I like the look of the Provia better than I do the Portra. I should have taken the yellow out of that image. It was a mistake on my part. All I needed to do was add about 5 points of magenta or some cyan, and I could have cleaned that up very nicely. Look at the Velvia. This is where Velvia really struggles, because that Velvia, there is no detail in the shadows and there is no detail in the whites. It's so contrasty to begin with that when you get into a high dynamic range situation, it doesn't have the range to hold it at all, and it just falls apart. That's why Provia for me is kind of the go-to transparency film, because if you're in a high contrast situation, it's going to hold the shadows and the highlights much better. I like the color better than what you get with Portra. I just feel like it gives you more vivid color. So here's an image we took of Peyto Lake. Again, I've now, a couple of corrections here. I've got a minus 1.25 exposure, and I've got a plus 50 dehaze on each one of these. And it's just interesting to see, we get a good image with the Portra, but I don't like the color. I don't think you can get the color to really be as vivid as you want it. It has that kind of pasty look. Some people love that because it has that vintage kind of the flaw of the film look, you know, but look at the Provia. The Provia is a much stronger color. Again, you see a little bit of that magenta in there, and also Velvia. Velvia has a beautiful, strong color, great contrast. Look at the blue of the lake in that Velvia. When you're in a full sunlight situation with Velvia, it looks really good. It looks fabulous. We're going to jump back to Pasadena now and just take a look at some of these films shooting Mayer. And I shot too much of this stuff, but I just had such a good time. There's the three in hard, direct sun. I was shocked at how the Portra reacted to that. I expected the shadows to be more open, you know, but you see the whites they're holding in that Portra. They're starting to lose it in the Provia, and they're really losing it in the Velvia. Now this is where that Velvia really does well. Look at this. This is open shade. There's really no sun on her whatsoever. It's just a little bit of highlight from the top. And so the Portra is really pasty, but it has that vintage look that is so beautiful. When you look at the Provia, look at that Provia. That's a beautiful skin tone, beautiful color. And even the Velvia is great because it takes whatever little highlight is there and kind of amplifies it, and it looks wonderful. I thought these were really fun images to shoot. Here's the same thing. We're in that open shade. Portra is great film, but it's just kind of pasty. I could work on these and make that look a lot better. But look at that Provia out of the box, just has a great color. I'm just used to that look because I shot transparency my entire career. That Provia is a beautiful film. It's open, she looks fabulous. The Velvia in this situation, because we're in direct shade, looks great as well. The skin tone isn't as great on here. I love this next one. This next one is one of my favorite because you got the background falling way out of focus. You got highlights from overhead, but she's in the shade. But look at that Portra really does well here because it's holding all those highlights. The shadows are not blocking up. The Provia is also doing quite well, but her shoulder's blowing out, her hair is starting to blow out, and in the Velvia, her hair is just gone. But this just has such a transparency look. It has that old vintage transparency look. I love this look a lot. There's Back Out on the Street. Again, we just get such richer color with the two transparency films versus the Portra, the neg film. And the last one here, just beautiful color in the shade. The dress pops. There's so much red in that dress. And that's just straight out of the gate. I'm not doing anything to these. So there's the last one. That open shade looks great. Same result. We get a little pasty with the Portra. Provia has beautiful color. We start to block up and lose our highlights, but it's hard with transparency film when you're shooting people and scenes to keep your exposure correct, not miss your exposure, and secondly, to not have your highlights, your shadows block up. That's why strobes are so important when you're using transparency film, because you've got to have the ability to overpower the sun and to open up the shadows and to get everything so that you are in a very, very narrow dynamic range. That's the only way you can make transparency film look good. But when you do, it looks fabulous. It has that great transparency, vintage look. So there's a look at those three film stocks, Portra 160, the Provia 100, and the Velvia 100. My favorite transparency film, the one that I think is the best for most situations, is Provia. I mean, the color is good. You're holding more of the dynamic range. You're holding the highlights better. It's not as contrasty as Velvia. The Portra, I think you can get a great look out of it. It has more of a painterly, kind of a soft look, which is very nice. You can correct that and make that look really good. So it's not a bad film, but the advantage of that is that you can miss your exposure by so far and still be okay. I mean, really okay. Whereas with Provia or Velvia, you've got to be right on with your exposure. A stop and it's starting to hurt a lot. And you've got to be right on with regards to the way the scene is set up. You can't have it be too bright or too dark. You really have got to control the lighting. So when I shot all of this transparency film for years, we controlled the lighting. We'd put up huge silks to soften the light out. We would have strobe heads to be able to bring up the shadows. You know, you did all kinds of things to make sure that your dynamic range was very narrow and that transparency film would look fabulous. But when it's fabulous, it's beautiful. It truly is. So I hope you found that interesting. Hope you found it useful. Get out there and shoot some film, shoot some transparency. Post it on our Facebook group. We want to see what it is you're doing and what kind of results you're getting. Let me know in the comments below the things that you feel about these three different film stocks, the things that you've learned about them, the things that you would like to do with them. So leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you below, and subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to our channel. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. We just want you to follow us and be a part of our community. We will keep sending things out, so keep those cameras rolling and keep on clicking. If you love stop motion and you want to learn how to do it, get over to theslentlens.com. Go to our store. We've got a great download there from Tricia Zemp, a beginning download that will teach you the basics of stop motion, and an advanced download that will help move your work to a professional level. Or you can bundle the two together at a greatly reduced cost. So get over to theslentlens.com. Go to the store. Get your stop motion download. See, is much more vivid and just a great color look. So that's one of the things we'll another random millennial? Second random millennial.